So I often feel like when we buy presets, we're sort of gambling, right? We're hoping that our hard-earned cash is going to buy us this digital product that actually works on our pictures. And there are lots of good things about presets. Different people have different opinions, but there are good things like presets help support artists that you admire. It's your way of putting a little change in their virtual tip jar, I guess, by supporting their work financially, which is awesome. It's part of the reason that I buy presets. But, ideally we want presets to help us in our work. We see something that we admire in another creator, and we try to bring a little bit of that into our own work. The other thing that good presets do for us is improve our workflow, right? They give us a place where we can start from, and they also build consistency. Lots of photographers make their own presets that they use in their personal work because it just helps with workflow and it keeps their work consistent. Over the years, I've spent more money than I would have liked to on presets that don't really work well for me. You buy these presets, sometimes they can get really expensive, and you bring them into Lightroom or Capture One and you work with them, and they just don't work. And of course, presets are not like a one click and you're good. All presets require some work, some tweaking in post. You start with the preset and it's a starting place, but it's not the end product. It's not just one click and you're done. You have to manage things like exposure and white balance and sometimes hue, but a preset should help you in your workflow. It shouldn't be something that you apply and then have to spend half an hour tweaking to get it to look halfway decent. And unfortunately, there are a lot of presets that you buy and just 90% of the time you apply them and they make your photos look like garbage, at least in my experience. So I had this idea that I would make a series about presets and tell you which presets are actually worth the money that will actually help you in your editing. So these are basically my recommendations for presets that I love and have used in a variety of circumstances that I think work across the board for various different photography projects that I can happily recommend and that I feel like are definitely worth the money. So today we're talking specifically about Phil Chester's PS presets, which are incredible. I've been using them for the past couple of months and I just love them. They have a really beautiful character to them and the skin tones are amazing. They look like film, so they're stylized but not in a really over-edited kind of way. They just look really nice. I've been super happy with them. So let's jump into Lightroom and take a look at the Phil Chester's PS presets. All right, so here we are in Lightroom and I just have a variety of different images that I've taken over the years, shot on cameras like the 5D Mark IV, the X Pro 3, and the EOS R6, the USR. I'll start with this image. This is Amanda in Dallas, Texas. Over here, we have the Phil Chester presets here at the bottom. These are the PS presets, like I mentioned. There are actually 9 of them in this pack, and in the new versions of Lightroom, you can scroll through and sort of get a preview of what the presets will look like as you scroll through them. They all look pretty good, but the ones that I typically gravitate towards are PS01, PS01 alternate, which is shadow boost. Also the PS08 and 8 contrast. These are black and white variants. And then PS09, which I think is just a really less punchy version of these presets that has a really nice color and character to it. So for this image, I'm going to apply number 9. I think it has a really nice look. And it looks pretty great right off the bat, but there are a couple tweaks I'll make in the basic panel just to improve the image a little bit. We'll start by bringing down the highlights just to recover some of that cloud detail. I might bring down the overall exposure of the image and I'll bring up the shadows just a little bit. And that to me is looking really great, I think. So that's a before and that's an after. You can go into the HSL and play around with that if you like. If you want to experiment with color grading, you could also grade this in a different way, but I'm pretty happy with what it's looking like. I'll zoom in here. I'll actually just keep this at 200%. And you can see the grain in this image. There is grain in these presets because they are reminiscent of film. And if you watch the channel, you'll know that I love grain in my images, so I love this about them. But if you want to turn down the grain, you can do that here. So this looks pretty great. Let's move on to another image. Here's one of Grace in Los Angeles. Again, we'll go through these. I think right off the bat, I'm knowing that I'm going to apply number 1. And I think with this, I'll bring up the shadows and I'll bring down the highlights. And I might make it a little bit warmer. I might bring up the overall exposure. And that's a before, that's an after. I think it looks pretty great. So let's move on. Here is an image of my friends Taja and Cody. You've probably seen this before if you have watched the channel. I'll start with number 1, which I just think is going to be great for this image. So we'll just go with that. Again, same kind of idea here. Bring down the highlights, bring up the shadows a little bit, maybe bring down the whites because there are some hot spots. Just really getting the most out of the dynamic range. This was shot on the Canon 5D Mark IV. Might bring up the shadows a little bit more. For this image specifically, I'll go into the HSL and I want to bring the greens all the way over to more yellow. I want to bring the yellows all the way over to more orange, and that'll just help them blend in a little bit more. So that's a before, that's an after, before, after. It really calms the image down. I just don't like having all that green around them. I want them to be the focus, and I feel like changing the color of these leaves to a more orangey feel that sort of goes with the vibe of this forest floor here helps emphasize them and doesn't distract as much as this crazy green does. So I'll just make that blend in a little bit more. And I think that looks great. So there's a before and there's an after. Let's move on to this shot. This was shot in the studio, again on the 5D Mark IV with my Pro Photo Light. And I think for this one, we'll go with number 9. I'm thinking that's going to be a good choice. So again, same kind of idea here. I'll bring down the highlights a little bit. I might bring up the shadows a touch. It does look a little bit green to me, so I might bring up the tint a little bit, make it a little, bring in a little red here. That looks pretty nice. Yeah, I think that looks great. See, the thing I love about these presets is like, they look so good after just applying them initially that there's hardly any work that you need to do to make them look great, you know, for the images to be ready. And that is what a good preset should do. It shouldn't hold you back. It should just keep you moving, you know, something that's consistent that you can rely on. And that's why I love these Filchester presets. Okay, let's move on to something different. This is a landscape photo, obviously. This was shot on the X Pro 3 with a 50mm f2. Really beautiful shot here of Santa Barbara through some type of like leaves or foliage or something. So for this one, I'm going to again go with number 1. And I'll bring down the highlights. Shocker. I'll actually bring down the overall exposure. I might bring up the shadows just a touch. And that to me looks really good. I'm going to press the keyboard shortcut R to bring up the crop and level. And I'm just going to level out the horizon here. And that looks great. Super happy with that. Here's one you may have seen before. This is Virginia and Daniel. So for this one, I noticed that beach shots really look great with number 9. So I'm going to apply number 9. Really love the colors here. This is actually a little bit too green right off the bat. So I'm going to just bring up the reds. I might bring down the overall exposure. I'll bring down the highlights, bring up the shadows just a touch. This image was shot with the Canon R6. Slow shutter, 1/15 of a second, so they're a little bit blurry. You can capture this nice motion, and also with the grain there, it looks pretty nice. Love this image. I would take out all of these people, but I'm not going to do that now. So that is a before, that's an after. This is actually pretty subtle, but again, you can see what it does for the image. Here's another landscape. Cloudscape, I guess. So I'll apply number 1. I think that's going to be great. Might bring down the highlights just a touch. For this one, I will just get rid of this stuff in the corner because it's easy and quick. And that's a before, that's an after. Might be a little bit too yellow. I might bring in some blue. Yeah, before. After. Looks pretty nice. Here is a photo of Lindy in Los Angeles. Let's see what number 1 looks like. Number 2. This is a studio shot. Number 2 actually looks pretty nice. Let's keep going. Number 3 looks nice. This is the other thing, like sometimes it's hard to pick because they all look so good. I like number 6 as well. Actually, yeah, I think I might go with number 6. Wait, let's see what number 9 looks like. Yeah, I'm thinking number 6 for this. You might have a different preference than me. Sometimes also as you're editing presets, you might create virtual copies and just do one preset on one of the copies and a different one on the other copies and then compare them. In fact, let's do that now. So here with this photo of Lindy, I've applied number 6. I'm going to press the keyboard shortcut Command quotation marks, and that will create a new copy of this image for me. And I think number 2 was also looking nice. Wait, let's see. Number 3. Actually, let's just go with number 5. And this one, I'll bring up the warmth a little bit. I'll bring up the shadows, bring down the highlights. So here's this photo edited with number 5. And here's the photo edited with number 6. If I select them both and press in, we can compare them. So you can see the one on the left was with number 6. Looks a little bit more stylized. The walls are a little bit more green. On the right, number 5. This is a really good way to apply presets if you can't decide, which one to use in a certain circumstance. You can apply them to different copies and then compare the copies and go from there. Here's a photo of Jamie in Santa Barbara. This was a sunrise shoot that I did recently. I have a BTS video coming out soon. This was shot on the Canon R6. I'm going to apply, let's see, I think maybe number 9. Yeah, I think we'll go with number 9. Number 1 is really great in a lot of circumstances, but sometimes it can feel a little bit too punchy. It can make skin tones kind of too orange, which obviously you can adjust that in post and get it to a point where you're happy with it. But in cases where I feel like number 1 isn't working as well as I want it to, number 9 works really great. So I'm just going to bring up the exposure, bring down the highlights a little bit, bring up the shadows just a little bit. Actually, I might bring down the exposure, bring it back a touch. So that's a before, and that's an after. So I think that looks pretty nice. We'll move on. I've been loving these blurred motion, movement-y kind of photos recently. You can do this by putting an ND filter on your lens and slowing the shutter. So this was shot at, can't read that, 1/15 of a second. f1.8, ISO 160 with a ND filter. So these are very stylistic kind of photos, very creative kind of photos. So they can take a lot of editing, more than like a typical portrait can. So let's just see what number 1 does. And I think right off the bat, this is looking really great. Again, you might play in the basic panel, just adjust that. Maybe bring down the exposure a touch. But I think that looks pretty awesome. Super happy with this like ghostly vibe of this image. Really cool. The next few images we'll look at are more like event music kind of photography that I'm also using these presets on because I think they work in this situation. So let's just take a look. Again, in this circumstance, I would apply maybe number 1. Let's see what number 9 looks like. Yeah, number 9 for like a less intense vibe, but actually guys, I'm liking number 1. So I think we're going to go with that. I'll just bring up the shadows to just take away some of that contrast. I might actually bring up the overall exposure, bring down the highlights and the whites just a little bit. Here's a before, there's an after. I just think it looks really nice. Like it just looks clean. It looks clean. It looks stylized. Again, the skin tones are really great. His hands, look nice. The sax is looking good. It just really, really happy with this image. Here, again, this photo of this building, I could use number 1 there. And just like with one click, it's already looking great. Here's an image of a local artist named Morganfield Burnett. And again, I'll apply number 1. And we'll just bring up the shadows here. I like the sort of shadowy vibe of his figure here with the nice light reflecting on his hands and his face. We have him against this really bright cityscape behind him. This was shot on the Canon R6 with the 85mm 1.2 RF version, which is an insane lens. I just made a video about it. So if you're curious about that lens, check it out. But for this particular image, I would just bring down the highlights so we can see more of that cityscape behind him. I'll bring down the whites, and I'll just bring him up a little bit from the shadows there, because he is sort of silhouetted against this cityscape a little bit. There, I think that looks awesome. So there's a before and there's an after. So you can see it just adds this punch of character, this really, really nice look to these types of images that I'm just loving. I'm all about this. Here's a similar photo later in the evening when the sun had set a little bit more. We have this big light modifier called an air star. It's a huge light that we set up for these balcony concerts. So again, I'll apply number 1. So this is looking really dark. So number 1 shadow boost might be the way to go here. And even from here, we can still bring up the shadows. This is the power of the R6, guys. I mean, look at that. That's all the way, plus 100, and still looks pretty clean. I don't think I'm going to bring that up all the way. I might bring it up somewhere like there, like 78. I'll bring down the highlights just to save some of that there. I might bring up the overall exposure, and then I can bring down the shadows a little bit more. So something like that I think looks nice. So that's a before, that's an after. Looks awesome. So there you go, Phil Chester's PS presets. Highly, highly recommend. They're incredible for so many different situations. Today we basically focus on number 1 and number 9, which are my 2 favorites, but there are loads of great options in this. Again, there are 9 presets with variants to use in this pack, and I think it only runs $75. So if you're interested in checking out Phil's presets, definitely check them out. I know he also has other preset packs available online that you can purchase. Just check out his website and check out his work. I mean, it's just really, really amazing stuff. So I hope you've found this video to be useful. I hope you found it valuable. Leave me any questions down below. Let me know if there are presets you're using that you want me to look into. I have a couple other videos in mind to show you other presets that I've been using recently that I really like. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a like. If you're new, say hello down below and consider subscribing. I'd love to see you at the next video. Thank you as always for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye.